Prime Minister Luxon and Estonia. So the Prime Minister was on The Country today. The Country is actually a program run out of Dunedin, but it's on the News Talk ZB network in the regions. It doesn't go to the big cities. It just goes to the regions. And as it sounds, it's a show about farming and agriculture and climate and that kind of stuff. And so Jamie Mackay is the host, and he was talking to the Prime Minister this morning, and they talked a bit about Estonia. And Jamie Mackay was like, why are you mentioning Estonia? What would you actually, what about that? We'll just play it, shall we?
Main targets that I want the government to be really focused on over the next 6 years. The public service, I want to be able to report on them quarterly to the public of New Zealand so they can hold me to account. And all I was saying is the benefit of these targets is it makes people work out what's working and what's not working, and that in New Zealand that we should be doing more of or less of. And then likewise, when you look at Ireland and what they've done on research and development, you look at what Estonia's done around its IT and digital world, when you look at what's happening in New South Wales, Singapore, other small advanced countries that are similar size to New Zealand. Let's learn from other countries that have also wrestling with some of these same problems. So, but a bit out of context, to be honest, as a headline, but that was the point I was making when I introduced the targets on Monday.
Well, Estonia has digitised 99% of its public services. You're trying to get rid of 99% of ours. A tongue-in-cheek, of course, Prime Minister.
But I think that the mindset I was just going to say in Estonia is an incredible story, actually, that the public can deal with their government and they're treated like customers. And they do that through offering really good digital services. You think about the challenges that we have, where actually our government service agencies dealing with your farmers through the MFE or MPI or through government in general. We make it hard and we make it paper, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, and we make it a lot of friction in that relationship. And so, why don't you think about the public as customers, as you would in a business, but as other countries have, like Singapore and Estonia, for example, and even New South Wales, and actually start to digitise the services so it's easier for people to engage with the government.
I think I'll stick with Ireland. Estonia's too close to Putin for me. Look, latest poll, very early in the electoral...
That'll do. He goes on about polling, which doesn't matter. Now, the one thing I wanted to put out there, Chewy, as well, is... Did you see that video clip of Trump today? Trump talking to rich fundraisers, promising them he'd lower their taxes. So, sometimes they reveal the truth without thinking. Luxon has been talking so much about his business experience, and we've constantly been saying you can't run a country like you run a business. Twice in that 90-second piece, he was talking about citizens as customers. He actually has said it out loud. We should treat people like they're customers. Now, to be customers, you have to be of a business. If you're a business, you're running the country very, very differently. So I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but when the Prime Minister starts to say we should be treating people like customers, I kind of go, well, I don't. If you're going to run the country like a charitable cause, a service-based industry, that really the bottom line doesn't matter as much about the good service, then that's not a customer. That's something very different. But he said it out loud, and I just thought, well, there's probably more to that, more to meets the eye than just that little word passing over so quickly, Chewy.
He's got it backwards. Look, I said this yesterday that he's actually really good at identifying problems and then going absolutely bananas with the solution. If he wants to treat the country like a company, the citizens are not the customers; they're the shareholders. The customers are business, not the other way around. And then I think that's quite telling. We're the people that invest in this country. The business extracts profit from it.
Yeah.
He's quite willing to pull Estonia out. Now, not to knock Estonia. I think seeing Estonia mentioned was quite a shocking. Why are we comparing ourselves to an ex-Soviet state? The thing when you look at those Baltic states is once they got out under the foot of Russia, they had to reinvent themselves very, very quickly to join the EU. So the charts of how much they've improved their GDP is out the gate. And I'm sure he's seen that on a graph and he goes, that's what we want to do. And stuff like the fact that they've digitized their public service, huge cost savings there. Their tax, which I was looking at earlier today, is really interesting. They have just a flat 20% tax on fucking everything.
Yeah.
Like, and just the way that they enforce it as it's, I forget the terminology on it, whether it's flat or whether it's progressive, but the way they implement it is it's a progressive tax policy. They tax land, not what's on the land. You know, they do lots of things that we don't do that could be worth looking at it. I'm not here to knock it, but he'll cherry pick things and not look at the reasons why it is that way. Yeah. One of the things that I think is, like, if you want to, like, he was talking like we need to double exports and that sort of thing. And I just went, how are we going to double exports when all of our investment is tied up in houses? Nobody's investing in these companies that are going to do the exporting that he wants. He's almost there. He's almost he's worked out there's a problem. He's worked out where he wants to go, and he's completely fucked how to get from A to B.
Yeah.
You need to get investment out of housing.
What you've just said about cherry picking, I think, is exactly it. You know, he sees a graph and he goes, oh, I'd like to have a graph like that. Oh, that's a good looking graph. And I've talked about this for a long, long time, because people would often say things on Talkback like, oh, you know, you should see Singapore. The streets are clean and there's no crime. We should have that here. And the thing is, the only reason Singapore can have that is all of how they run the whole society. You can't just go, I want clean streets like Singapore here, because the reason Singapore's got clean streets, certainly at the time, one of the reasons was the serious way they would punish you physically with bats and stuff if you littered. Now, I don't know if it's still like that now. So you can't have the result of a policy without having the policy. So you can't have the result of Estonia or Ireland or somewhere else without having all the workings of those places as well. You can't have the crime rate of Singapore or the clean streets of Singapore without all of the policy that leads to the crime rates being low and all of the punitive punishment that leads to them being low. You can't just go, look how they're doing it. This is what you're saying with the word cherry picking, Chewy, without implementing all the stuff in that country that leads up to that. So without basically getting all of Singapore or all of Estonia society and going cha-ching, 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 on top of New Zealand, you can't just have their outcomes, to use the word he loves. It's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. I want to play some more stuff, though, because this is from AM show. I think this might have been this morning, might have been yesterday morning. But they talk a bit about this, and, you know, to his credit, Lloyd Burr does a little bit of pushback. And there is one very, very, very good question that's going to come towards the end, Chewy, which will be in one other clip after this, which has a little bit to do with entitlements. Entitlements. Wait and see.
Can I ask you about Estonia? You mentioned Estonia yesterday as a country that we want to be like. Why Estonia? Why do you like that country?
Well, all I'm saying is that, you know, I really have a vision. By 2040, I want New Zealand to be one of the leading advanced small countries on earth. And for that to happen, I want us to be more prosperous economically. I want us to be doing better socially, and I want us to be delivering on our...
For that to happen, you need to start building it in New Zealand, a New Zealand model from the ground up. Not going, we want to be like Estonia or we want to be like Singapore. Because as we've just said, unless you bring every single policy of Estonia into New Zealand, you won't get their outcomes. So the way you do that, Mr. Luxon, is you start being the fence at the top of the cliff rather than the ambulance at the bottom. You start being the carrot and less of the stick. You start at the bottom and you start building a New Zealand model for that to get to that, rather than looking at other countries who have societies unlike New Zealand, therefore we can't get the same results that those societies get. That's the way you do it.
Environmental goals and targets. When I look around the world at other 5 million people population or small countries, advanced countries, you look at the work of Estonia, and they've done some fantastic work on bringing digital services to their public services, a customer service mindset about how their government interfaces with their citizens. I look at Ireland and I look at what they do on research development and innovation in science and technology. That's really interesting, as is their work on education. I look at what Singapore have done with respect to getting delivery out of their public service, not not dissimilar size to New Zealand. They have targets like I've just announced. So does New South
Very
Wales as a
different
state
country, though.
government as well. So, I just look at other places to say part of the thing is that, many countries around the world are wrestling with the same problems that we have here in New Zealand. If we're very successful, I think, at a lot of things, but where there's things that other countries have done well in, we should just steal it and make sure we bring that into New Zealand's thinking as well.
Yeah, I guess the difference is that we're not a former Soviet republic, are we? And we're not an emerging market. We're a fully developed market.
But we have lots of other advantages, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, we have lots of other advantages, but I'm just saying to you, across the world, there are other small advanced
Didn't seem to
economies.
like that one very much, did he?
Have done things that work.
No.
Likewise, we've got great things happening within New Zealand that we actually want to see across the rest of the country, and we've got to make sure that it gets everywhere. So, that's part of the challenge. We've set some ambitious goals. We want New Zealanders to focus on we are here to improve the country by these targets, and as a result, we look at whatever's working around the world in New Zealand. We innovate, we try different things, we make sure that everything we're spending money on is delivering improved results and gets us closer to delivering those goals.
There you go. So that's the conversation from the AM show as well. And I thought it would probably be appropriate, and you've started talking about this to do with the taxes, to bring up Clint Smith's tweet that I mentioned yesterday, but if you weren't here, we'll see it again. So if we want to be like Estonia, okay. If we want New Zealand to be like Estonia, it has free tertiary, free GP visits, free public transport, etc., paid for by a 39% tax wedge, New Zealand is 20%, including a 33% social security payroll tax. It also has 82% home ownership, a legacy of distribution of homes post-USSR. As I'm saying, you can't get the outcomes of these other countries without transposing the whole society onto New Zealand, and he's not doing that. And I think you were very astute earlier, Chewy, when you said he's seen a graph. And that's about as deep as it's gone. He's seen a graph of growth and goes, that's what we want. Yeah, there's a lot of people have to show their workings, Mr. Luxon, to see how to get that graph. And unless they show the workings like they have in that country for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years to get them to that graph, unless you can do that in your term, the whole previous 50 years of Estonia, probably not going to get the same outcomes.
And I know I'm beating a horse here, but it's not dead, but it's very close to. The problem that we have is investment.
Yeah.
We've created our own money trap in housing, and it has completely skewed our society almost. We've taken away people's security in later life because they can't afford to buy houses. We've taken away the ability for people to start families in a timely fashion. They're putting that off later and later and later. We're affecting the jobs that people take because the first sort of thing that they're considering is, can I live in that area? I might be able to get a better job in Auckland, but I can't fucking afford to live there. Those sort of things. And it's all driven from housing, and it's all driven from a place where it's been such an effective tax dodge for so many people for decades, and nobody wants to touch it because our ministers and our lawmakers, they're up to their eyeballs in property portfolios. And we're not going to touch that. It's too scary to touch that. But while the money is so good in there, then why would you put it into a new business that is innovating, that is coming up with the next big thing? Why would you take that risk when you can buy an 80-year-old villa and double your money in a couple of years? It's just ridiculous, and they won't touch it. They won't touch it at all.
Yeah. All right. There's one more clip that I want to play from this interview, and this will leave you cold. And just remember, people out there who dislike Jacinda Ardern vehemently. There's some of you out there, there's some of you watching right now. I want you to think about the question that this wealthy Prime Minister is about to be asked by Lloyd. And if Lloyd doesn't say Jacinda Ardern did it, I would accept Christopher Luxon's answer. Because Christopher Luxon's going to refuse to answer something in a second that Jacinda Ardern chose to do. We're being a little bit cryptic here, but let me play it for you and see what you think. And just remember that idea about taking $1,000 a week for the house he was living in and what I'm entitled to. Just remember that.
Very quickly, and I don't want a long-winded answer from this, do you deserve a pay rise?
Again, those are decisions for an independent remuneration authority. And
That's
again,
not the
it's important
question.
Prime Ministers and MPs aren't involved in setting their pay.
Would you freeze it like Ardern did?
Again, we've got an independent remuneration authority. They need to go through a process. It's designed in a way so that you don't have a Prime Minister or an MP commenting on their own pay or setting their own pay. Let's see what the remuneration authority does. They're working through that now. Let's let them do their work.
Okay, that sounds like a no to me. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
There you go. That's a little bit at the end of that, and people out there who are critical of Jacinda Ardern's government, fair, but this Prime Minister makes it abundantly clear with his non-answer that he is not going to stop him or his ministers getting their pay rise in a same period where he's talking about the cost of living crisis, the same time period where minimum wage is going up such less than inflation. He's not prepared to actually say, you know what, we should stand by what we've said of others. At the same time, he's firing people out of the public sector. I wonder if you took all of the percentages, the small percentage incrementally increases that the politicians are getting, I wonder how many salaries that would add up to for someone working in one of the government agencies that he's cancelling. I wonder how much money that would add up to that they could add or take off their $3 billion tax cuts that they're currently getting from taking literally the food out of children's mouths, Chewy.
He could have answered that question really easily and not like the bulk of what he said is correct. Like I 100% understand why the remuneration authority is completely independent. It's a good idea. Like it's a great idea. But that wasn't the question that he was asked.
This is what I said, especially when Lloyd says, like Jacinda Ardern did. So that means there's a precedent, and yes, you're not supposed to get involved with it, but it obviously means you can therefore still instruct them no pay rises. So that's the line that matters. So that has been done within the last term, and he refuses to rule it out. He refuses to rule out pay rises.
Remember that I've talked about that Luxon does not recognise political capital when it's put in front of him.
Yeah,
he recognises capital. There's no argument about that. But political capital he doesn't recognise. It's just like a missing asset thing in a video game. There was an opportunity for him to go, yeah, the everyday New Zealanders are doing it tough, and I'm not going to prejudge what the remuneration authority says. They're a completely independent body, and the Prime Minister cannot be seen to be influencing that. But I have my personal views when people are doing it so tough. That's saying more without saying much more, if you get what I mean there. I once saw, I forget where I was reading it, but at one point, the average backbencher's wage was close to what a teacher would get.
Right.
Now it's near 4 times what a teacher would get. And I also find it telling that when we look back at what the Green Party was suggesting as far as a wealth tax, that basically started to kick in at a backbencher's salary.
Right.
So, I don't want to get into a conversation where like these fucking pricks with their fat paychecks and stuff like that. Like Parliament, being a politician is a hard job. It has very, very long hours, lots of travel, lots of responsibility and that sort of thing. And although and you're open for criticism all the time. If they weren't, we wouldn't be able to do this. But, it is a tough job. I think it needs commiserate compensation. But it's also one of those things where it's all political. You have to sort of go, well, look, no one's getting a pay rise this time because nobody can afford their fucking groceries, and it's a bad look. It's a political decision. It's image.
It's also, though, the word deserve, that Lloyd used a clever word. Do you deserve a pay rise? Not should you get one. That word carries some weight, meaning are you deserving of? Not just the remuneration will decide. Like if you're a teacher, you go up a scale, 12 months, you go up a scale. It's got nothing to do with deserve. It's like if you're there for a time period, you go up a scale. But I just think it's an interesting perception.
I think that was almost a trap.
Yeah, because Luxon has already been proven, and he's used the word about what he's entitled to.
I'm entitled to my entitlements.